Okay.
Just like to thank members of the media today for their patience, as always. It was a very good day from our perspective, as the Yukon Forum has now had its third consecutive engagement, if you will. I think we're at a very pivotal time in our relationship, not only as First Nation in a collective perspective, but also with the relationship with the Yukon government. And I felt that this meeting was very pivotal in the sense of how we not only maneuver through the issues, but come to, at the end of the day, a common place where we feel not only the progress, the priorities that we've designated within this relationship to come to fruition, and that we feel the work that has been done to date is meaningful. And I really feel at the end of the day that we've put it through the test, if you will, over the last couple hours, and very pleased to see that the nations who I represent are at the place of contentment, and they feel optimistic and positive in regards to the roads that need to be ventured upon next, or the trails that need to be broken, if you will, to open up the opportunities not only for First Nation people here in the territory, but for all Yukoners at the end of the day. And I really want to thank the Premier and his government for not only taking the time, but their commitment to these processes, because at the end of the day, it takes everybody in the room to have the ability to have that constructive dialogue, to be able to voice their concerns in a very respectful and positive way, and be able to clear some of the air, if you will, in regards to some of the concerns that the nations have, because we are plagued and challenged every day in the communities, not only to create a safer place for our children to grow up, but all the outside effects that are affecting our citizens now, as we spoke this morning. So just really want to thank my leadership for their involvement and their commitment to the Yukon Forum. Thank you.
And I'll just, I think Grand Chief Johnson speaks for ourselves as far as what has happened here today and then the progress forward. So I'm just going to open things up to questions so you have more time for questions. So anybody from the media wants to ask some questions, please go ahead.
Mayor, Mr. Johnson, have you guys completed the 5-year review results? Or was that done today? What takeaways or challenges do you guys complete?
It's not a review, it's a plan, Dan. So we did have it presented. It's not something that has been first seen today. My office, along with the Premier, we've been working on not only engaging our nations, but going through the plan in extensive detail. There is not a lot of fundamental detail in it, but it does have a lot of composition in which will allow us to break into more formulated working groups, more perspectives given to each topic, as it does have ripple effects from the high levels, from justice, health, education, environment, how we do economic development in the territory will have ripple effects into working groups. And a lot of the ingredients is already in within our agreements on how we can move on in a successful way. So I think just coming here to reconfirm our positions, let alone the encouragement that we've received to move ahead and to start tackling some of these big issues.
Yeah, like in a nutshell, joint actions, basically, right? What we accomplished today is documents that are going to be living and breathing, that represent the common motion forward, right? And the comments that I made today in my closing remarks was, these plans, these documents, they're not worth the paper that they're signed on unless they're living, breathing documents. And we heard that echoed from some of the leadership that has been working in leadership for decades. Have some very powerful comments to a newer government as far as pathways of the past, and giving us direction from that. We don't want to go down certain roads. We got to make sure that you understand where we've been, and therefore, the urgency from some of the communities. We heard from some chiefs how we're talking about the same things that we talked about 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Those types of things. So I think the biggest thing for me today was just that whole concept of capacity is only built if we work outside of silos, if we actually get down to a common vision forward, and that was the basis of the conversation today. The first Yukon Forum was a lot of goodwill. Second one was more of a balance, and now what we're seeing right now is we are getting down into some very technical pieces, and very community-specific issues. And every time we sit down, we grow as a community with that collective direction.
Follow up to that, premiering the financial advisory draft report to mention that First Nations, self-governing First Nations have a proposal to Ottawa to get more revenues through taxes, gas tax, other taxes. Says the Yukon government hasn't signed off on that or looking at that proposal. Where do you stand? Was that discussed here today, taxes and how First Nations can benefit better through different tax programs?
So again, we're not going to get into the reads as to what the conversations are here at the Yukon Forum. There's a sanctity to that. These are conversations that are happening all the time, though, with First Nations and their conversations, First Nations governments and Ottawa. We've had conversations as well in the past about taxes and settlement land, these types of thing, and the income tax there. The Financial Advisory Panel is doing their good work as a third-party agency. They're going out to consultation now. First Nations governments, as we heard today, are engaging with the panel, and we're going to wait before we comment any further on all of those recommendations, all of those options that are out there until we hear from Yukoners. We're going to do what Yukoners want us to do based upon the input from Yukoners to that process.
There was a lot of discussion regarding fiscal relations as it is the fundamental pillar, if you will, when it comes to sustaining self-governing here in the territory, to be able to offer those programs and services. And it's not just depending on the mining community, if you will, in regards to creating that economic base here. We feel that there's creative ways of dealing with how we create economies, and that we need to look at other mechanisms in order to sustain ourselves, not only as governments, but to ensure that prosperity of our people goes forward.
Can you talk a bit about what those other fiscal mechanisms would be? Like, can you give me some more specifics about what changes were discussed?
Well, there's not really changes. It's about empowering our agreements to the fulfillment. We look at cultural tourism, which there's a tour currently happening right now in the traditional territory of Champagne-Ajac, where there's other abilities for us to raise income, and as taxes as being one of the fundamental pieces going forward, because we do depend on our personal income taxes coming back to our communities. We haven't necessarily ventured into the discussion on what the tax parameters or frameworks will look like going forward, but that is definitely something that we need to discuss. As much as the Premier says, we need to be a part of the solution going forward also, and that may result in First Nations contributing to certain things to not only empower, but to ensure that capacity gaps are felt, or met, I should say, not only by his government, but by the respective community governments also.
Yeah, there's lots of conversations about federal funding. There's lots of conversation about bilaterals and trilateral and conversations with Ottawa. And the more that we collect here on and when we say about a common vision and a common voice, that common vision is the implementation of these modern treaties, right? So as we look at all those different chapters, and there's chapters on taxation, there's chapters on economic development, but there's also chapters on the prosperity of the environmental side of things as well, right? And so, as we have a common conversation about all of the tools, they're written down for us, and we had a great conversation about that today as well. And we have to do a better job as a government of educating the public servants on those chapters. And we had a scrum yesterday in the legislative in my office talking about First Nations 101 type of courses. For our government, the more that they know about these treaties, the more readily available the tools and the tool case to make sure that when we move forward on the prosperity, not just financial prosperity, but the prosperity of our environment and of our community. The rules are already written. It's just a matter of all of us collecting our heads around how to move forward on the next logical steps of those chapters.
And how those processes will, at the end of the day, unfold to increase the success of everybody and the ability for us all to be prosperous in the territory.
And I guess that's sort of what I'm trying to get at, is like, are there benchmarks in the plan so that you know that it's not just a piece of paper? Like, how do you know that it's working?
I don't know. I mean, there's some really aggressive timelines on these, and that's the issue coming up again. What a great problem to have is, it's not whether or not there is a plan or how to move forward. It's how do we move forward together. That's the thing. And one of the big conversations we had today too was, we come out and we say, it'd be great if the First Nations, talk together more about best cases, best policies in different areas and how we can all learn and share from each other. And the First Nations governments come back and say, that'd be great too, but do you know how busy we are right now? It's very busy with the boom that's going on right now in exploration and people in our backyards and land use planning opportunities moving forward. And also just a commitment from this government to work with First Nations is also a capacity issue within the First Nations governments as well, and our government, right? So as we're trying to find these success stories together, these conversations really help us define where those roadblocks are. But the problem isn't that we have a common vision. The problem is we have to work on our capacities. We as a government have to keep training opportunities, apprenticeship programs, those types of things. There's more that we can do to help secondments as well. We have a lot of land developers in our government, and we see other First Nations, especially First Nations that aren't attached to a municipality, having real issues with getting through the paperwork and the regulatory processes. So there's tons we can do together, and every time we sit down and meet at the forum, I tell you, we have those conversations, those great conversations. There was at one point we were talking about maybe we should just have just the leadership and in the room, just the elected officials, so chief and councils and the ministers, because we were afraid we weren't going to have a frank enough conversation. We had that frank conversation. We didn't need to clear the room today.
Can I back you up a little bit? Can you explain, you're announcing today an action plan. Can you just very simply explain what that is? I feel like we kind of jumped over that step. So what did you agree to today? What are you launching? What's it all about?
It was actually 11 pages of agreement that...
we didn't get it, so I just put it
fair enough. And it's based on our 4 pillars that we agreed to at the very beginning of the relationship when we signed the declaration to work together. Fiscal relations being very fundamental. As I said, that is the life, the bloodline of our existence, the ability to provide that program and service delivery to our people, and plus to make good, solid investment. The other one is where we have the legislative agenda, which is another pillar of our relationship, including the bilateral and trilateral engagements as we take our Made in Yukon approach to the federal parties, if you will, and deal with that. And then the third being the implementation of our land claim and self-government agreements. So out of that, we've developed, like I said, bullet point forms regarding how we're going to do it, who's responsible, and the timelines that we've set forward to accomplish them. And they are very bold. I must admit that we've set some very strong timelines to our respected officials and leadership to accomplish the things that need to be done. And as some of these priorities are fulfilled, other priorities will take their place, if you will, in regards to these pillars that we've agreed to. So.
And again, like the main point of this is it's a joint action plan, right? And so out of all the concerns that we're talking about, of all the issues that are put on the table, this represents common goals and common priorities. As every Yukon Forum goes forward from here on in, this becomes more of a living, breathing document, and it becomes more comprehensive as we go. So what we heard right around the table was, we're good with this, and there's a lot of buts. And that is, but our community specifically, we need to talk to you about and we really appreciate the guidance from the Grand Chief, but also the patience from the chiefs, that they're not going to air a lot of personal or community specific issues at this table. This is more about a conversation about us moving forward together. And then we have the bilaterals with each of the governments as individuals. Next week we're meeting with the Tesla and Clinton Council. We're also meeting with the Carcross Tagish. Those types of meetings will come after this. And every time that we have those meetings, we are going to be held to the joint priorities that these documents lay out in more of a general case and getting more specific as we meet more.
So you've been doing these meetings for a while now. Do you feel this is a big step in terms of moving this forum forward to actually have a document? Can you speak a little bit to, I guess, the evolution of this forum?
Well, I felt like today was very pivotal. If it wasn't agreed upon by the leadership, really at the end of the day, I think the forum would have probably dissolved, because we've been, in this process for many years. It's been agreed to since 2006 to have this opportunity. And I don't think if we bared the results or the feeling of the spirit and intent in the room wasn't there, we would have went away and done our separate things. But I feel really optimistic that we are moving ahead in the right direction. Take one more comment out of respect of time, and
So all of Yukon First Nation chiefs here today?
Unfortunately, we had some chiefs that were absent just due to their own community commitments. Unfortunately, not everyone was here, but I would like to think definitely majority were here today. So.
How confident are you can meet these deadlines? Like, they are pretty, there's a lot of them that are pretty tight. How confident are both of you that they are achievable?
These aren't new topics, right? I would like to think that there's been a lot of substance already been developed. These working groups, for instance, have been together. When it comes to FTA, the financial transfer agreement, these have been around for a decade, right? So, I mean, I don't think a lot of it is about advancing it through good dialogue, and some of them are just, are going to take some time in order to fulfill those mandates. But I believe, we got to believe in the process, right? And we just want to thank all the hard work that has gone into supporting the development of governance in the territory, and we look forward to the results as they unfold.
I just want to confirm that every one of the First Nations agreed to, like, all of the First Nations agreed to the action plan?
Yes, all the ones that are represented in the Yukon Forum.
So, and I just add to that, the whole concept of there's two ways of going together, going about moving forward as the Yukon deals with current issues. We could either build silos and do a divide and conquer, where every First Nation deals with the government in a certain bilateral sense, or we can work together. And it's hard to break down silos, and it's hard to work together. It is, because what we ask for in that arena is patience, and we ask for in these conversations, like I said earlier, those higher level conversations, and then the bilateral conversations afterwards come from the mandate, right? So it is a lot of hard work, and I share the same concerns that the Grand Chief shares as far as this process working. But again, as we go around the table and we talk to the chiefs that are here, and even the chiefs that couldn't make it because of certain circumstances in their communities, this process is believed in. For the most part, we think that we're seeing a lot of good progress. We're not going to solve all the world's problems, that's for sure, and there's always going to be issues, but in general, we keep on learning and growing together, and if we can continue to do that, then it will be good for all Yukoners.
Just one question. Do you intend to take the Yukon Forum to each and every First Nation? Is that the idea, or?
Probably not realistic based on time frame. I mean, it was difficult to get people here 45 minutes out of town together at once, and we respect the fact that we're in the community, because this is where self-government is actually physically happening, and the first order of government here is the Champlain and Ajax First Nation, right? So we want to show to the rest of the world, for that matter, that we are, we need to understand what's going on in the backyards of our respective nations, and ideally within the proximity of Whitehorse, because realistically we need to be respectful of people's time. The people that travel from Buntut or Beaver Creek, they're not physically able to go as quickly as we are from closer proximities to Whitehorse.
Although the traditional territory of Toronto Cochin is a great place for a meeting or a visit.
Yeah.
Thank you, buddy.